Throughout this essay, I'm going to be breaking down Walt and Jesse's relationship in Breaking Bad and explain how, in the real world, these scenarios come up throughout relationships and how it can lead to toxic friendship, toxic leadership, and how people can ultimately get taken advantage of because of their situation. In order to break down this relationship, you must start by analyzing each individual person. First off, we're going to analyze Walter White. Walter White is a chemistry teacher at a high school who develops lung cancer and is in desperate need of money to afford his treatment. Throughout this process of being in the meth business, Walter White truly transitioned into his alter ego, Heisenberg, in which he cares for no man and only cares about himself. He claims to be a family man, but in the end, everything that he did was for himself, as he admits in the final episode. Walter White, although acting as a mentor, completely ruins Jesse Pinkman's life. Jesse Pinkman is a former student of Mr. White and has been taken advantage of numerous times throughout the show. Jesse Pinkman is a drug addict who at the beginning is a meth cook, but when teaming up with Mr. White, he is nothing but an assistant. His skills of the street knowledge is what ultimately helps him in their relationship. And how their relationship started off like this to being one of the worst relationships known throughout Breaking Bad. The dynamic of Walt and Jesse's relationship is that Walter White is the cook. He is the brains behind the operations, while Jesse Pinkman is the man who pushes the product. That's how it is in the beginning. But as they go along and team up with people like Gustavo Fring, it becomes a little more complicated, and it leads to situations in which Walter White and Jesse's relationship become infringed. As Gustavo Fring is trying to get rid of Walter White in season 4, we can see the difference in relationships and mentors that Walter White and Gustavo Fring is. We can see how bad of a mentor Walter White is to Jesse Pinkman. Walter White would rather yell at Jesse than actually show him and prepare him to get him higher in the field that he's in. Instead, Walt would just have Jesse as his dog and have him listen to whatever he says. Walt is a terrible mentor and a terrible friend. He even poisoned Jesse's stepson because Jesse himself did not have any kids, but his girlfriend had a son who he very much cared for. And Walt, in order to have the control of Jesse, in order to have his friendship, which will persuade him to stay with Walter White as he sees how Gus Fring would have poisoned him when she really didn't. But still, Walter White manipulates Jesse into believing this, and in fact has no choice but to believe Mr. White and follows in his footsteps. Again, this is just one of the examples in which Walter White takes advantage of Jesse. As we've seen at the end of the show, Walter White and Jesse Pinkman are completely enemies, even though at the end we kind of see a bit of a soft side from Walter White. But you think that he's coming back to save Jesse. I personally think that he comes back because he doesn't want anyone pushing a product that he created, and he wants to be the sole distributor and the sole maker of the product that he once dominated. The end of the show is a hot mess for both characters, but in terms of their relationship, it is completely spoiled. The relationship that we thought was once great in the beginning has turned to the worst, and is all due to the fact that Walter White is a selfish man and doesn't care about Jesse. After analyzing the two's relationship, you can come to the conclusion that it was just toxic. Jesse wasn't good for Walt, and Walt wasn't good for Jesse. If Walt never met Jesse that day on his ride along, he would have never been in the meth empire, and he probably would have still been a good person. Their relationship is a perfect example of what happens when two toxic people meet, and it just isn't good for the both of them. Walter White and Jesse are toxic. Sadly, this is the case in many people's lives. We think that we're in the right spot, they think that they know what they're doing, and ultimately, they're in the wrong. They're with the wrong people in the wrong crowd, and that's why connections are important to make, and it's just perfectly executed throughout Breaking Bad. There are many examples in Breaking Bad that could use the example of toxic relationships, but I think Walt and Jesse's is the perfect one to use and to show how one person takes advantage of another and that they both are not right for each other. And we see this happen with big brothers and trying to be good role models for their little brothers, but ultimately they're not right for each other, and the little brother should not follow. It's toxic, and it's sad to see. It's a show that in which both characters you love, but the toxicity is not healthy for the both of them, and ultimately shows how they're portrayed in the real world.